All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really sharp critique of what one commentary is calling an unholy alliance in Pakistan, this supposed link between religious authority and the state. So, let's just jump right in.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First up, we'll look at a recent pledge that really kicked this whole thing off. Then we'll get into this idea of selective silence. After that, we'll dig into the history, the so-called playbook. Then we'll look at the system itself, how it's supposedly built for the elite. And finally, we'll see what all this means for the average person on the ground.
So where does this story even begin? Well, it all kicks off on December 10th. A really prominent group of Ulema, religious scholars, they get together and make this huge public statement. And it's a statement that gets a lot of people talking.
And what they said directly to the army chief was this: "We will not tolerate any criticism against the Pakistani state or the armed forces." Wow. I mean, the commentary we're looking at here calls this, and I'm quoting, "nothing less than a coronation," basically a full-throated endorsement of the current power structure.
So right away, the source material asks a pretty pointed question. Is Pakistan's only identity its armed forces? The argument here is that a pledge like this just pushes everyone else to the side. The artists, the judges, the business people, the workers, everyone.
But this is where the critique gets really interesting. It's not just about what they said, it's about what they didn't say. The speaker argues that this very loud pledge stands in stark contrast to their silence on a whole bunch of other really critical issues.
And the list is, well, it's long. The commentary points to things like the conflict in Palestine, disappearances in Balochistan, drone strikes in KP, rights violations in Sindh. The list goes on. And the argument is, where was the vocal condemnation for these things? That's the contrast they're drawing with this very public pledge to the state.
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, the analysis says we have to look back, because this isn't some new thing that just happened. No, the argument is that this is part of a long-standing state playbook that's been perfected over years and years. The source literally lays out this timeline, calling it the capture of religious authority. It starts way back, evolves from just controlling government structures to actively bringing religious voices into the fold, especially under General Zia-ul-Haq. And that all leads up to today, which the speaker calls a kind of Zia 2.0 model. So you have to ask, right? Why does this keep happening? Well, the commentary offers a diagnosis of the political system itself. The core argument? It's been designed, maybe even engineered, to be predictable and, more importantly, controllable.
And how do you do that? Well, the analysis claims it's because almost every major political party isn't really about ideology. It's built around a cult of personality. Think about it. The Bhuttos, the Sharifs, Imran Khan. The system is dominated by these huge individual figures. And the thinking is, when you know the key players, the whole game becomes a lot easier to manage.
And here's the kicker. The source argues that the whole system has been squeezed so that only elites can even get a foot in the door. You need the money, you need the connections. And why would you want that? Simple. Elites have something to lose. Their businesses, their reputation, their wealth, and that, according to this argument, makes them way easier to control.
So how do you keep a system like this going? Well, the commentary points to this recurring promise you hear all the time in Pakistani politics. It's this idea that the country is always on the verge of a huge breakthrough, something the speaker has a great name for, the takeoff position.
You've probably heard it before, right? We're just about to take off, we just need to solve this one last problem. But, as the speaker points out, the name of that problem changes every few years. One minute it's an insurgency, the next it's terrorism. But the core issues, they never seem to actually get solved.
All right, so after all that, what's the end result? This brings us to the final and pretty bleak verdict from the speaker on what a system like this actually does to the people living under it, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as justice. And to show just how broken the justice system is perceived to be, the source gives us this incredible side-by-side comparison. Case 1, a scholar admits he spread false state propaganda, dangerous stuff, about the Lal Majid incident, and his punishment? He just has to apologize. Case 2, another scholar gets thrown in jail for accurately describing a Christian belief? You see the contradiction? The point the critic is making is that justice isn't about right or wrong, it's about whether or not you're on the state's side.
And when justice seems to disappear like that, what's left? The source says the state is left grasping its straws. You can't sell a story about democracy, you can't sell a story about justice, you can't even sell a story about economic prosperity anymore. So what's the only thing left? Just a demand for pure obedience.
And this really gets to the heart of the whole commentary. It's this deep feeling of disillusionment. It's the sense that people feel totally abandoned by the system, that there's no hope left. And the most painful part? The respect for the country isn't just diminished in the eyes of the world, but in people's own hearts.
Now, right in the middle of all this hopelessness, the speaker throws out a massive, surprising number, $1 billion. And this number introduces us to one final character, someone who, for the speaker, becomes a symbol for this whole broken system.
So what's the $1 billion? It's the estimated value of everything a jeweler from Lahore allegedly ran away with. I mean, this guy was in business for 35 years, and then one day he just sells it all, sells his house and disappears, taking, it's reported, his client's life savings with him.
And here is the final and honestly most provocative twist. The speaker says, "You are my hero. I love him." Not because he thinks stealing is okay, of course, but because he sees this jeweler as the one person who truly understood the system, realized he could never win by playing by the rules, and just checked out. He opted out of the whole game.
And that's where this analysis leaves us, with a really tough question. In a system that's perceived as completely broken, where all the trust is gone, who were the real winners? What does it even mean to win in a game that feels so rigged from the start?